Judge Allison Burroughs sides with Harvard and somewhat against common sense. This is the Daily Fire for October 6th. I'm Mark Stewart. Look, there's common sense, there's the law, which often agrees with common sense, but we have a convoluted system of equal protection and titles from the 1964 Civil Rights Act that don't end up giving equal protection after all. Judge Burroughs is a judge in the Harvard case that now got dismissed. The plaintiffs are Asian American applicants who got denied admission to Harvard despite superior grades and test scores compared to applicants of other national origins and races. That, if it is under federal support, is blatantly against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Judge Burroughs got it right, but for the wrong reason. She says this system of Harvard's is necessary to serve a compelling state interest, and that state interest is a private institution's sense of diversity. Remember, this is just diversity of skin color, not anything else. The one thing that, along with race and national origin, the one thing that civil rights law has been going out of its way to protect. A very good thing, and here comes a very good case because the numbers ridiculously show discrimination against Indian Americans, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans in favor of whites to a small extent and Latinos and blacks to a large extent. Harvard, in arguing the case, denied that it discriminates against Asian Americans. Of course it does. That is a laughable statement. Even Judge Burroughs didn't buy this, though. She says that their use of race, they do use race as a factor, is legal because diversity is a legitimate goal. Now that's the problem as I see it. Diversity does not trump the law. The law, the 64 Civil Rights Act, it does not say to ensure diversity on a college campus. You want the law? It says that institutions receiving state assistance shall act, quote, without discrimination on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. How clear is that? Harvard would say, here's how we, and by the way, Harvard's not alone, okay? It's the marquee liberal arts institution in America, but almost every college in the US does this to some extent. So at Harvard, they actually have a point system to counterbalance the clear numbers that come from grades and SAT scores. So the effect is that the SAT scores of Asian Americans accepted to Harvard are over 250 points higher. This is on a 1600 scale than African Americans accepted to Harvard. Now, Harvard has other possible ways to make the standout African American in a tough environment with maybe less parental guidance than the Asian American counterpart, but they don't use it. Instead, they have this personal essay. And the personal essays, it seems almost no matter what is said, if it comes from a Latino American, they get higher scored than from an Asian American. These personal statements are flimsy, unlike a GPA earned over 3 years, unlike an SAT score codified across the nation of testers. A personal essay allows totally subjective evaluations, and they're still being guided by the race of the person submitting the personal essay. I wish we could make this experiment, but I'm pretty sure here would be the result. 2 applicants, absolutely equal, cover up their names, okay? One has a nice thing on her resume, I worked for my parents' bodega until midnight many nights. The other, I worked for my parents' Chinese restaurant until midnight for many nights. Harvard's letting in the bodega girl. Okay? The argument that they made, Harvard said, race can only help, not hurt, a student's chances of admission. Well, that shouldn't be, that's not wisdom, okay? Because if it helps some, it hurts others. But they want to try to let that slide. In the end, they win the argument not because Burroughs is confused. She hasn't lost her mind. It's because we have a system that is now so tangled up in feelings and legislation and subordinate legislation and rulings by courts and opportunity commissions that we can't straighten out fairness. We can't even interpret anymore the purpose of the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act of '64 is now a well-meaning mess. Let me go back to why. It's because it states that the 14th Amendment, it's taken it beyond what it was intended. 14th Amendment, to give equal rights to recently emancipated blacks, former slaves. The Civil Rights Act of '64, to rectify problems of discrimination, racial discrimination, primarily in the Jim Crow South, but wherever it would occur under state auspices, federal and state. Now, federal power has been stretched so far that aid to colleges is pretty pervasive, coming from the feds. So Harvard isn't technically a private institution that could do what it wants. Interesting if it could, because then the Civil Rights Act would not even apply. Would people want to go there? If they did, it would not need to have these goofy, subjective, personal statements to determine merit. If Harvard really wants diversity that ends up including more blacks and Latinos, squishes the numbers of Asian Americans, it can do this overtly. Just make it based on socioeconomics and not race. You want to put a thumb on the scale in favor of the socioeconomic have-nots and making the haves have more work to do. It's doable. It could be blatant, not underhanded like they've done. What would that mean? The thumb is on the scale in favor of the less privileged kid, fewer role models, maybe one-parent household, parents that didn't go to college in the first place. Now, that actually does still advantage an awful lot of Asian Americans, but we should want them. It means the children of Kobe Bryant, Barack Obama, Tiger Woods, they better be outstanding, exceptional, because they're not getting the thumb on the scale that right now admissions is giving to well-off African Americans. I hope we can straighten this out, because it is manifestly unfair and it's making a joke of our legal system when we can look at an absolutely blatant discrimination based on race by, of all institutions, Harvard, and have to say, gee, that seems to be fair enough, when it's not.